Chair, and thank you, Mr. O'Leary and your officials for being here. Just at the outset, one thing I wanted to say was, in relation to this debate we always have about corporation tax and what's been paid by companies here, you would think sometimes that people think that companies exist only to pay taxes and that they serve no other purpose. And I find it very frustrating, particularly when we look at foreign companies coming in and of course they pay corporation tax, but they also employ thousands of people. Those people get their salaries, they pay taxes, they spend their money in the economy. But we also see these companies investing a lot of time and money in helping to build ecosystems and infrastructures in particular areas, for example, in gaming and the tech sector. And we also see with the big companies like Google and Facebook that they get involved in the local communities and they do things like the Silver Server Project and other digital inclusion work that they do. And I think it's important that we say that every time we talk about this, as you did in your opening address and in your initial exchange. What I'd like to focus on, if I could, just for a moment, is the issue of resources in the IDA. And how many people that the IDA has working for it.
Okay, up until recently we had an employment control framework of 254 people. It doesn't necessarily mean we would have had 254 on board, because the way it works, you have to wait before you have a vacancy and then go get permission and then go round. So, technically you're never going to get to quite that number, so there'll be someone below. But as part of a reorganisation of some state agencies, the majority of 4FOS is going into the Department of Jobs Enterprise. We are in a multi-tenanted building. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 organisations in it. 4FOS, we're running all of that, in terms of the services, the management of the leases and some other properties. A team of 12 people from 4FOS have come over to IDA since the 1st of July, working on those particular functions, which are not just in relation to IDA, but also be for the remaining part of 4FOS. There's some lawyers and accountants in the building. There's
sorry, what I'm interested in is how we deploy those resources overseas. So of the 254.
Yeah, overseas we've probably got about 50, 55, that type of number.
It's 50.
50. And yeah, the United States would have probably about 27, 28. Europe probably has around 10ish, maybe a little bit more. 11. Okay.
And then the rest would be in the BRICS, or is it?
Yeah. For instance, we've 4 in Mumbai, 1 in Bangalore, 3 in Shanghai, 1 in Beijing, 1 in Shenzhen, 1 in Singapore, part-time in Sao Paulo, part-time in Moscow, and full-time in Korea, in Seoul, which we just opened in January of this year.
Looking just firstly at the US then, in terms of the people that we have there, 2 things. The first, I happened to be there recently, and I was in Cleveland, which I know was a big industrial city in the early 20th century. It went into decline then throughout the 20th century, but it's kind of coming back. A lot of international companies are based there. And the Taoiseach had been there recently, and I was kind of following up as a visitor in a way, and it seemed that people were only kind of getting turned on to the idea of Ireland as a place to invest and to look at their companies based on perhaps that trade mission that he'd led. And what I'm wondering is if we have enough resources in the US to capitalise on the potential that's still there.
So the way we operate is we've Boston, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Mountain View and Irvine in Orange County as the 6 locations. The way we run our business, we base it around global teams. So in other words, we have a global team for, say, the technology sector or for the life sciences or financial services. That's under one leader here in Ireland, the global business head, and they control the strategy for the sector and the resources. So if somebody's working in life sciences in Mountain View, they actually report back into the head of life sciences rather than the regional director. So that's the footprint, and they have, various geographical areas because of the sheer magnitude of the states. Certainly, we believe there is more potential to win more foreign direct investment, but it is a people-intensive activity. You've got to build up relationships with a multitude of management in companies. So we would be of the view that there is more foreign direct investment available, but we have also made choices, like we have taken people from other areas in the organisation and move them to the BRIC countries that we're talking, or the BRIC or similar ones.
So are you saying that if there was more people working for the IDA, we'd be able to take better advantage of these parts of America that maybe haven't been tapped properly yet, or these areas or these sectors that could be tapped better?
Well, I don't know about what I would say out of these areas. I would say overall, for instance, in this emerging companies, these young companies we're talking about, there's a huge number of them altogether, enormous, and they're just exploding. And we weren't in that market a few years ago, so we had to find a team of people to do it, and that's what we find when we want to do more. We don't have the more, because in the same way as everybody else, and our number has been frozen for a couple of years. It was reduced, but then it was frozen, which is positive in its own right. But there is more potential in the US market across a wide variety of opportunities.
The Mountain View office, is that by Palo Alto? Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
It's about 10 minutes from Palo Alto.
I actually had a chance to visit it a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was very impressed by what they were doing there, and it was before that we started looking at these emerging companies, which, as we know, if we can get them to come here, are incredibly important for the ecosystem and helping to scale Irish companies and to build those structures here. But do we have enough people? Because there's so much happening in that part of the world, so many different events, so many people coming out of the universities, and if we were to have more resources there, do you think we could take advantage of that sector?
Yes,
Do you think you have,
most certainly. If we had more, we'd win more.
And in terms then of the resources that you have, the staff that you have you done a kind of a cost analysis to value each staff in terms of how much business has been brought in?
Absolutely, we have it down to for everybody extra. We've made the calls on what we could deliver, and if I can say this, there aren't many state agencies that go out and say this is what we're going to deliver and this is what we're going to be measured. It's very public, it's very transparent, and in the same way we've estimated that if we had X, Y, Z, what that would lead to.
So what's keeping you from getting extra resources at the moment then?
Well, we don't control that.
But who do you go? You go to the minister then to say.
We have made a submission, and I think the biggest challenge at the moment is: do you look at a thing as something, an initiative, as a cost or as a benefit? Mm-hmm. And one can see why that is. But if you want to gain more, you've got to invest in the same way as companies do. When the discussion was on is IDA a successful agency, we'd like to pride ourselves in things where we work very much like a business. We have portfolio managers, we have a clear strategy of what we go after, and naturally, the resources will determine the results.
And do you think that your line department is so minded as to see extra staff in the IDA as investments because of the extra business that they help?
Well, the departments and ministers have to make calls across a whole variety, and we wouldn't be privy to the decision making that they make on a wide variety of items.
Okay, and then just in relation to the BRIC countries, because obviously America is very important now, but you talk about the medium to long-term strategy, and it has to be to get in there and to compete as we can. If we can be a gateway for America, there's no reason why we can't be a gateway for China, for example. But it's also very resource-intensive because these are large countries and they are complex in ways that we are only starting to understand. So when you look at the current planning with your resources, are we going to see more of a shift of people out of the US, say, into somewhere like China, or?
No, we won't take staff out of the US. It's our biggest market and there's more to be got out of it. We've taken staff from other areas in the organisation. We've slimmed down some of our regional presence in Ireland on the basis that it's much better to have people out in the market generating rather than wait for the site visit to come. But in a global scale, our competitors put far more into the likes of the Chinas, the Indias, and then by a magnitude, they put huge resources into those markets.
And so is there a particular country or region or sector that you're pushing for extra resources at the moment?
Well, there are a number of initiatives that we would like to do, and there's about 6 areas where we would put resources into for different things, and they're the ones that we believe in. But right now, today, we don't actually have that. For instance, the emerging businesses that we spoke about, these new companies, is the most obvious and the one where you get the quickest return on it. But there are a series of others. For instance, you know, the transformation agenda with the big clients we have here, you know, to make sure that they invest. Like if you look at a corporate, some of the big companies, you might have to be talking to 30 people in corporate and build that network. There's a constant battle to win this reinvestment all the time. Like competition for foreign direct investment is intense, and it's got even more intense since the European economy in particular, since the market has got quite flat. You have more companies turning to FDI for whatever growth that there is.
And then just kind of the final point I wanted to raise was in relation to our relationship with embassies in terms of the IDA, and sharing resources or helping to kind of improve, you know, a multiplier effect with people we have. I mean, are you getting good help from the embassies in the BRIC countries?
Yes, most certainly we are in the BRIC countries. They are very, very helpful. But ultimately, and by the way, they play a much stronger role in the BRIC countries or the emerging countries than you would say in Germany.
In terms of trade?
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, when we're dealing with the senior executives, you know, one of the things that is important, and we hope we do well, is we've subject matter experts that can talk to companies, that can talk the talk. In other words, if it's somebody in the technology sector, they're an expert in it. They can hold their own with anybody in the world. If it's in the pharma sector, the same. So, you know, having a representation role is helpful for certain things, but at the end of the day, it's dealing with the C-level executives, you know, either at CEO or Chief Information Officer or Chief Technology would be the important thing.
Okay, and then when it comes to say something like the European markets, there wouldn't be that kind of interaction with the embassies on trade issues?
No, actually, we do with the ambassadors, particularly in Paris, Germany and London. Like we've a dinner coming up in the embassy in London, I think around the first week of October, and there you would use the embassy as a draw to try and get in, I think maybe say 25, 30 clients, a mixture of existing and ones we're in discussion with and ones we found it difficult to access. You do that, but that's not the mainstream, you know, you might do 1 or 2 of those a year.
Okay, and then just my last question, sorry, Chair, is just about the your relationship with, say, the private sector in this area. For example, there are a lot of Irish companies or Irish initiatives that are proving quite successful, that are making connections with people all over the world. I mean, if you look at the Dublin Web Summit, for example, as one, bringing people in and really doing a good job at selling Dublin and Ireland as a place to invest and to locate. What's your relationship like there, and how are you sharing resources to take advantage of that?
So the Dublin Web Summit and Founders, which is allied to it, we will be an exceptionally active participant in that, you know, with Paddy Cosgrave and his team. It's great the way he assembles so many entrepreneurs, and we'll have a number of people, including for that particular initiative, we're actually going to bring our team around the world that deal with these emerging companies. They're going to come back to Ireland as part of it.
Okay, that's very
So we
good.
think it's a great initiative.
Okay. No more questions. Thank you.